So here I am at our studio, Garan Nifa Tattoo and Fine Art Gallery, and I finally have finished this painting. And so if you're seeing this video, it means my cousin Angela has received her painting. She didn't know she was getting one. I'm going to give you the story behind this before I go into the symbolism of it. Basically, in the summer of 2020, we went down to my cousin Angela's homestead, and I got to see her amazing gardens and all the stuff she was doing with different plant groups and animals. So she worked with goats and chickens and had honeybees on her property for a while. She grows. She is actually available on I don't know it's an app or program called Skiller. And she answers questions about agricultural pursuits and how to better perform regenerative agricultural processes and troubleshooting parts of plant growth. And she does mushroom foraging and forages for plants. She's a brilliant and wonderful human being. She's very creative. So when I got to see her chickens, I've always liked chickens, but I was not really interested in chickens. Chickens didn't grab my attention. And when I saw this one particular chicken of hers, I was just overwhelmed with how pretty it was. And I remember taking many, many photos of that animal. And I thought about it a lot afterwards. I thought about the patterning on the feathers and just the general nature of this chicken was so endearing and beautiful that I just guess I was collecting photos. I don't know what I was thinking. A while later, unfortunately, things changed and she no longer has her homestead. However, after that event, I thought to myself, you know, if it wasn't for people like her, a lot of us wouldn't have so much joy and happiness in our agricultural pursuits. We wouldn't even dare to dream about certain agricultural pursuits. But because she takes bold steps to do things and to understand them, she inspires and shares that knowledge with others. And I very much wanted to share something with her. So I went about the endeavor of making this painting. Now, if you know me and you know what it is that I'm into, there's a lot of symbolism and ideas behind pieces of art. And there is no exception here. Before I show you the process, the time lapse of creating this, you will notice that some of this was done quite a while ago. So like I said, it took me a long time. And I reached a stall point on a painting, and artists often will hit that stall point at certain points. And I've been working my way out of an art block for more than a decade now, connected to experiences with a studio that I shared studio space in the same building as my cousin Angela. And it was because of her care that I was able to get that studio space in the first place. And while there are some negative things, not connected to her, but connected to the people in the building that I could talk about sometime, it was because of her that I had such a wonderful creative period in that studio space and made great pieces of art. And this was kind of a all in all thank you. So in the painting, we have this beautiful chicken, and the chicken is working in what has been reduced grass area. Chickens like short grass. They'll eat some grass. Chickens can take 17 to like 28% of their diet, roughly, off of just forage alone. They don't just eat grass, though. They like to eat bugs. They like to eat bits of material that they find up here hidden in the grasses as a hornworm. Common pest in gardens. Chickens love those. They'll eat those. There's also many species of parasitic wasps that take advantage of destructive insects like this. And when we work with nature, when we work with systems, and we don't force ourselves, but we listen to what nature needs, we find solutions to these problems right here in the embodiment of the natural world. Chickens in regenerative agricultural systems are brilliant. They form the component for a cleanup crew that exists in nature. In nature, people like Alan Savory and Greg Judy and Joel Salatin and Richard Perkins will point out that birds represent part of the cleanup crew. They clean up parasitic organisms that would infect or disrupt or upset livestock. And so when we do regenerative agriculture, we do rotational grazing, or we make compost, or we want to hit impact after an omnivore like pigs or ruminant species like sheep or cattle have been in an area, we introduce chickens in controlled impact situations where they're allowed to forage and clean up, spread manure, knock down parasitic species. Just piled it up last night. Don't know if you can see the steam coming off of it. I just opened it up for them. So if they don't do anything with the top, I tend to open it up and it makes it a little easier for them to move around. So here we have her next to the nice tall grass that she is not necessarily jumping into, but she's got this within range. She's got a short area where she can clean up, she can eat parasites, she can enjoy some small grass, and she is going to contribute to this environment by depositing a rich layer of nitrogen-strong manure, which, yeah, it will burn the grass a little bit. You see this yellowing and almost browning down here. That does happen. And 30 days from there, you will see this lush grass growing in its place, boosted by that level of nitrogen, and the cycle repeats itself. All right, I want to show you this side by side. Now, over here is where the chickens just were. It's just starting to grow back. See how dark green that grass is? Over here is the forage as it is. And there is what the chickens were on. That's the chickens did that. We didn't seed this. If we come back this way, that's where the chicken tractor finished, and right here is where it started. Look at how nice and green this grass is compared to even the side of the hill. Chickens have been part of the American system of existence and food creation since the beginning. And it's only been in the last few decades that we've become overwhelmingly dependent on grocery stores. In fact, those didn't even exist until the 1950s. And it's only been in the last 20 or 30 years that, in the effort by suburbanites who don't understand nature, they've gone out of their way to restrict chickens in places like your little picket fenced areas that represent the beauty of suburban living, with their short grasses that don't feed pollinators and don't provide any nutrient to the environment. They're simply there to look good. If we were to bring back something essential and wonderful like the chicken and normalize this in everyday life, we could accomplish so much for the health and well-being of the environment itself, as well as our own well-being, by interacting and having a symbiotic relationship with animals. Something that has been normal for most people on planet Earth for thousands of years, and only recently has been thought of as abstract or unique. The chicken is an easy animal to work with, and they're wonderfully unique in their personalities. They're not the brightest bulbs. They don't need to be. They just need to do their job, and we need to let them do their job. If we really cared about the impending food crisis that's being brought on right now by, in my opinion, overreach and overstepping of governments and involvement in things that go too far back to really analyze easily. If we really cared about people, we've been encouraging them to have chickens. In fact, during World War II, prior to the use of monocrop food systems that are heavily dependent on chemicals, oddly enough, a byproduct of World War II munitions factories, we encouraged people, the United States government encouraged people to have chickens and grow food in their backyard to lessen strain on the systems that were trying to fight a war. They were called victory gardens, and it helped people be sustainable. If you have a few dozen chickens, which may sound like a lot, but not really, even on a quarter of an acre, a few dozen chickens, if well managed, is actually quite good. You can produce enough eggs that you don't need to go out to the grocery store and buy meat or eggs. And eggs are one of the most bioavailable foods that we know of, having a bioavailability of over 93% by some estimates. So if you think about it compared to broccoli, broccoli has a bioavailability of maybe 35%, and then the rest of it's waste. But with an egg, you have bioavailability that's an almost perfect food for human beings. And if we ignore the bad suggestions of the last 30 years that we stay out of the sun, we can take the cholesterol in eggs, which is actually good for you, and convert it to healthy vitamin D. And that's something we certainly could use in the middle of winter when, let's say, there's a worldwide sickness that we want to combat. Our immune systems would do a much better job if only we had the right amount of vitamin D. She can help us with that. From the beginning of time, and in almost every culture that has these animals, we know that chickens, and specifically the rooster, represented up here in the kind of Scythian Pictish swirl of smoke emanating out from the chicken, and out from the forage itself, and I'll get into that in a second, has always been thought of as a solar symbol. Birds tend to greet the sun, and roosters specifically in almost every tradition herald the coming day or the sun. They were so connected with ancient belief systems going back thousands and thousands of years that they are still considered sacred. In fact, in one of the last areas to be Christianized amongst the Belarusians, the chicken was still worshipped, and they are featured on the tops of steeples of churches as a symbol of Christ, and yet they preceded that symbol by other solar deities, as again, they are a solar-based animal. They're diurnal, they work throughout the day. They start almost in a manner that would be crepuscular, where they are active in dusk and dawn, but in the sunnier side, so they are diurnal. One of the reasons I put the smoke element here is to illustrate something very important that Alan Savory himself has discovered and proven, is that rain does not produce forage. Forage produces rain. We've had it backwards for a very long time. Living out on what would be considered the eastern part of the Pioneer Valley in New England, I get to witness the amazing and substantial cloud formation that happens, and yet those clouds have all but dissipated by the time they reach the place we used to live on the coast, Salem, Massachusetts, where you would see some clouds, but not to the glory, grandeur, or humidity that are produced in agricultural environments. And it is forage and its ability to hold water, its ability to sequester carbon and entrap it in the soil, and also as part of its cooling mechanism to allow forage to evaporate water in situations where heat has become too intense, and thus the cooling system starts over again. As the forage collects water, it evaporates up into clouds and then rains down again on the earth. If you want to replicate this, you could do it really easily by taking a big bowl, putting a bunch of greens in it, and covering it saran wrap and leaving it out in the sun, and you will see immediately condensation from evaporation appear at the top of the saran wrap, and then it will start to drip down. You're seeing the same cycle in action. It doesn't really matter to me what spiritual system you abide by. I think that it doesn't take a spiritual component to understand that nature has the understanding to fix. It's us that use our ability to override nature and not listen to her that fail to see the important components that would help us to fix the world. It is Alan Savory during his TED Talk that explains that if just the beef farmers worldwide were to switch to his rotational grazing method, which has returned rain to parts of Africa that were in almost persistent drought for decades, if they could just adopt his system, then in the next 10 years afterwards, we would sequester all the carbon that has been released since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Ask yourself why you're not hearing about that. Well, it's probably the same reason why only 5% of the USDA's budget goes towards soil regeneration, while more than 85% of the USDA's budget goes to chemical monocrop agriculture.
So here's what's happening. We're seeing rain, which comes at 10 or 15 miles an hour. Huge. Now notice, what do you notice in the conventional till on the white board right off the top of the bag? Can you guys see that? What do you see on that white board? You're having dislodging of particles, right, Michael? What's the problem with that dislodging of the particles? Erosion.
And of course, in a landslide decision today by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which hopefully will be upheld, glyphosate, which the FDA apparently thinks is fine, was ruled to be a toxic poison, which it is, and is one of the main components in a common weed killer, which is sprayed with an industrious force across landscapes, thus reducing the bioavailability of natural soils and killing off populations of insects, and thus making it inedible for even the most basic of avian friends. If we seriously want to fix the earth, we must start with our own backyard. And I think all of us could derive a little bit of joy and happiness from this type of engagement with nature. We only have to take that step to do so. And it is people like my cousin Angela who make that step that much easier and attainable. Angela, we love you with all of our hearts. And I can now smile knowing that you have just taken your first steps back onto a homestead situation where I know you have some animals, and very soon we'll have your chickens again. And now you have another one to join you. With this painting, it was done with an underpainting, and it was done in layers. So it is not alla prima. So the underpainting layers are black and gray. You can see that in the time-lapse piece. And then we layer paint over it. It is extremely glossy. I put a lot of gloss on this one. In hindsight, I don't know if I would have done that, but I think I like the way it turned out. It makes me happy, and it was a lot of fun to do. I will be doing prints of this, as so many people have seen this. Angela's never seen it. Every time we've talked or she's been around, I have hidden this piece. She hasn't seen it. And I've had a bunch of people ask, will you do prints of this? Not only will I do prints of it, but eventually we will be doing some stuff connected with regenerative agriculture, and where we will be using pieces like this to explain these concepts. And of course, it doesn't need to be said, but if my cousin Angela wants to use this for her own educational purpose, it is now her painting. She can do with it what she will. So yes, we will be doing prints of this. And I've had a few people ask, how would I get a hold of you to talk about how we do this stuff, or painting instruction? Or how do I get a hold of somebody like you or your cousin to ask questions about agriculture or take next steps? So hopefully in this video at the end, we can include some of those links and connect you with her and connect you with people who can help you on your journey. And if you're looking to do art, I'm not an expert, but I will give as much information as I can on these processes, and you could look at this and say, wow, I could never do that, but you can do this. And not only can you paint this, you can also have this in your yard and have joy with it. And I think that there's a great healing in that. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and we'll show some images of the painting, and maybe we'll talk through some stuff. But thanks for listening, and this was so long in coming. Also, last thing, it was because of Angela's painting and how heavy this is that I have recently found out how to use a French cleat with a painting, which is funny because people are like, you didn't know about this? Well, I didn't. And then I had another friend of mine, wonderful human being, who is of French-Canadian ancestry and is a brilliant carpenter. And he said, I always just called them cleats. I didn't know that they were French cleats. And he looked it up. He said, they are French cleats. So I'm like, well, there you go. I mean, when you guys invented it, I don't know. So we hooked a little French cleat, and this will be on the back of all my pieces. Nice smooth piece here, but underneath there's this cleat, and there's a matching piece that goes to it. So you screw the matching piece into the wall, and you lock this into place, and it's not going anywhere. there we go. So that's fun stuff too. And if my cousin Angela had known I was doing this, she probably would have suggested a French cleat, but I didn't know that was applicable to this process. So yay, win all around. So again, here is the short grass, and here, little brown flecks, the fresh grass growing at the front. The long, older grass with the mature seed heads at the top, a little golden glow from that stuff. And there's your hornworm. And of course, there is our rooster heralding the coming sun behind the atmospheric cloud type material. I refer to this as like Scythian or Pictish swirl work. I do a lot of this stuff, and it probably has its origin some place back in the Ukrainian area of the world with pottery, probably between 4,000 and 6,000 BC. Thank you so much for looking. Peace.